community. For those of you that don't know me, my name's David. I'm one of the engineers at Galoy. I mainly work on the Bitcoin Beach Wallet app that you might have heard of. Just in case you don't know Galoy, we make open source Bitcoin banking software, and the most famous instance of that is the Bitcoin Beach Wallet in El Salvador. If you want to know more about us, you can check out our website at galoy.io. In terms of this call, there's 3 groups of people on it. There's or that have been invited at least. It's the Galoy team have been invited, the Bitcoin design community, and some members of communities who use Galoy software. And the idea, I think, was that we could combine. Galoy has multidisciplinary people on the team: engineers, marketers, business people, people that have been on the ground in communities building, and we have the Bitcoin design community, which is made up of design professionals and people with an interest in design, focused on the Bitcoin space, and then members of our communities that use Bitcoin software, Galoy software, that are actually on the ground talking to people that are using this day to day. And the idea is that we can bring all this together and come up with innovative solutions to problems that any of us might have. So the wider context for what we're actually going to be discussing today is that in the space we have multiple different ways of making payments now. Lightning, on-chain, LNURL. In Galoy, we have pay by username and different things. So how do we make this easily explainable for users, display it in the correct way so that it's easy to understand? That's the kind of wider problem space. Today, we've got a very specific example that we want to share, that we want to get feedback on. But we'll share our example first, and then we can maybe open it up to the wider problem space if we exhaust the specific example that we're looking for. Yeah, and just to let everybody know who's just joined the call that the call is being recorded. It will be posted to a public platform, so keep that in mind if you're making any contributions. With that, I'll pass over to Kamal, who's going to present the problem that we've got, the specific problem, and then I'll open up for discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be on this call, and I hope I can set the table for the discussion that will ensue, convey the problem that we see on the ground in El Zonte. I'd like to go back a little bit to the time of the Adopting Bitcoin conference in November. There were a lot of Bitcoiners on the ground in El Zonte at Bitcoin Beach. And what merchants did at that time in El Zonte, most of them were using or are using the Bitcoin Beach wallet. If you're not speaking, could you mute your microphones, please? Merchants wanted to have this easy way to have a static QR code that everyone could pay to, right? So there's a couple of reasons to this. First of all, it's cheap. Second of all, they don't have to pull out their phone, keep it charged or whatever. So there's lots of practical reasons for that. Obviously, there's some downsides to it, but it's something that, got a lot of adoption, I would say. And the way that was ensured on the ground, at that time, the Bitcoin Beach wallet didn't have LNURL support. So note that. So what we did was encode the username of the Bitcoin Beach wallet user. So since most of the people in El Zonte used Bitcoin Beach wallet, that was not a problem. But when Bitcoiners came to El Zonte that used, I don't know, Blue Wallet or other Lightning wallets like Phoenix, Breeze, they scanned the QR code, and obviously it didn't work because they have no idea what that username is. So that was one feedback that we got. Obviously, nobody's going to be interoperable with that. So the solution we thought of was, let's reach out to the community and get LNURL implemented, because with those, we can have reusable static QR codes that are compatible with the broader ecosystem, right? So any wallet, and most of the wallets in the ecosystem currently do have some kind of Lightning address support and LNURL support, and they can pay. So that's what we actually did. So we got this Lightning address support, and now we have these wallets that are interoperable with the latest generation of Lightning wallets. But the problem is with these pay codes, as we call them, LNURL pay codes. Now the problem is that Lightning wallets that do not have LNURL support can pay to these, like for example Strike or Cash App or Chivo Wallet, that are also very prevalent in El Salvador. And so that's basically an improvement, but on one end, more interoperability, but on the other hand, no way to pay at all anymore for many of the wallets that are prevalent in El Salvador. So maybe one additional piece of information that is useful here. So with the Bitcoin Beach wallet username encoded in the QR codes that were used in the beginning, there was still a way for other Lightning wallets to pay, even though it was not seamless. So what they had to do was scan the QR code with their camera and open the URL in their web browser, which leads them to a page where they can generate a Bolt 11 invoice and pay then to that, right? It's not seamless, but it was at least there was a way for someone to pay nevertheless. With the switch to pay codes, a certain set of Lightning wallets becomes now interoperable, but those that do not have LNURL support at all can't pay at all, to pay codes only. So, and maybe as a last point, what we also got feedback from the ground is there is like increasing Bitcoin tourism coming to El Zonte, and there are users coming with all sorts of on-chain only wallets as well, like Samurai Wallet, or some even have their notebook with Spectre Wallet, or just an exchange wallet like Binance or Coinbase that do not have Lightning capabilities at all. They're coming to Bitcoin Beach in the expectation that they could pay with Bitcoin, but unfortunately their wallet of choice, which is a Bitcoin on-chain wallet, doesn't support the standard that's on the ground. At least that's the status quo. So there's a need for a solution there as well, because they should be able to pay at Bitcoin Beach as well, right? So these are a bunch of problems, and I think before we maybe jump into the idea that we had how to solve this, are there any questions so far?
And maybe just to bring a bit more context, I shared on the messages on GT 2 tweets that if you click on it, you will have an idea of the QR codes that we had initially for the merchant in El Zonte. And so if you open this QR code with a phone, like you can see the experience, right? Like you are directed to a website and you can get an invoice. But if you try to pay this same QR code with any wallet, none of them will understand it except the Bitcoin Beach wallet.
All right, so everything seems to be clear so far. shall we jump into the Figma then?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Should I share my screen then? Probably. Let's see. Chrome tab. Yeah. Okay. All right. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the starting point is actually the page. So for the every Bitcoin Beach wallet user can go to a web URL, which is basically ln.bitcoinbeach.com/their username and then /print. This is a page that helps them easily print out their pay code. As we like to call them. We brainstormed a little bit with the LNURL mafia on, and LNURL seemed a little bit less not fancy, so they said a fancy name for it would be pay codes. So we liked it, but obviously would also be good to get your feedback because we don't want to invent names on our own. But for the time being, we call it pay codes. So this is basically the pay code, and on top it has the Lightning address. So the pay code is basically just the same endpoint as the Lightning address, and yeah, every wallet that has LNURL can basically pay it. So when a user comes to calls this URL, they can print their personal pay code and slap it on their point of sale. And this is actually then the idea how it should look like. So they will have their Lightning address in this format on top of the page, then the pay code very big, and here on the bottom this will be a fallback, which is the old QR that has the username encoded. So all wallets that either do not have Lightning or LNURL support will probably first try this, and when it fails, they will try the fallback, is the assumption, and that will direct them to this web URL page.
So I think that's a key point there, is that one of those QR codes can the LNURL one can be read by any wallet that supports it, and the fallback one, if you're using a Bitcoin Beach wallet, will take you into the app. But if you're using a third-party wallet, it's actually a web URL, so you have to scan that QR code with your camera and open up in a web browser. So it's kind of a clunky flow.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin Beach wallet can directly pay to both, but other wallets can't pay directly to these to this fallback. They have to open it in the camera. That's right, and they will then be directed to this web URL of that user, where they can request a Bolt 11 invoice, and that is basically an invoice that, yeah, all Lightning wallets can pay. But if a wallet is not a Lightning wallet,
actually, no, it's not all Lightning wallet can pay. There is some additional hurdle here. When you open the page, you have a amountless invoice. So it's an invoice that doesn't have an amount embedded into this. And there is some wallet that can pay this, some wallet can't pay this. Like if you try with Strike or I think Cash App also, they are not able to pay to amountless invoice. Okay. And so if you want to get a successful payment to this wallet, you need to click on set invoice amount, put an amount in set, and then you can pay with a wallet that are only compatible with amount full invoice.
Okay, so we have another drop off here actually of wallets that cannot pay to amountless invoices.
Unless the user that is trying to pay knows that, okay, I can put a manual amount here by, going to set invoice amount, but we for sure will be losing some some further, people here that doesn't know these nuances.
All right. So generally, like most Lightning wallets can pay here, or actually all can. But those that cannot pay to amountless invoices have to set the invoice amount first. So that's an additional step. We'll need to add that.
And just to stay on this a minute, I think actually thinking about this, the wallets that are not compatible LNURL, I think about Strike and Cash App, two wallets that are popular, will not be compatible with amountless invoice. They are the ones that are compatible with the like they have a reduced set of features basically compared to other wallets, and therefore it's like something to in my life. I guess that at least on my mind, I'm just thinking about it now. I didn't think about it before.
So can I ask a question here on this screen? So if people open this from their phones, why show a QR code? Because I cannot scan a QR code that's in my phone with my phone. Right? Could it just show a big keypad that says enter the amount you want to pay with a button that says next, and then maybe it's just a link click that opens up the wallet with a Lightning invoice or so?
So I think below the on-chain address there is an overlay, but I think we have a way to copy the invoice also, so we can copy it. But maybe the prominence of the QR code is. No, I think if we tap, so if we click on the QR code to copy, so we could copy the QR code just by tapping on the QR code, right? But maybe it's not obvious to the user, and maybe So the reason why we have this QR code is because this link could be also open from someone on a desktop, and in that case, you assume that okay, the best way is to scan the invoice if it's from a desktop. But if it's a mobile, we could have just the copy QR code, copy invoice.
You could detect if it's on desktop or mobile and show different experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
Or even better, simpler might be to just put a URL parameter in the QR code that's on the sign, and it has like a little URL parameter that's like, from mobile or something like that. And so then it uses that URL parameter to detect that it doesn't need to show the QR code by default. Because you essentially know by that URL parameter that somebody's scanning the sign in Elzonte and not trying to access it from their desktop.
True.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I had a question, another question with the one on the left. When I look at the screenshots that you shared on Twitter earlier, at the bottom there were instructions. Were those not helpful, or did you decide to remove them intentionally, or you still think they're still needed?
I think they're still needed. They have probably they would definitely be needed. I mean, usually so I think we should add basically where we have fallback the instructions that we had earlier.
Do you maybe want to finish off the flow, Kamal? Or I don't know if did you get to the end? I can't remember.
Okay, so so basically over the fallback, all wallets that do not have LNURL support through the instructions open the web URL, and are directed to this page where they first see an amountless invoice at the moment. They can set the invoice amount, and if they're a Lightning wallet, they can pay to a Bolt 11 invoice. If they're an on-chain wallet, they have to click here again, and then they will. And this is a part actually that needs to be built on our side. So they can generate an on-chain address or request to generate an on-chain address, and that is behind the captcha because we want to prevent automatic address generation because it slows our instance, the instance of the bank down if LND has to monitor too many addresses. And then basically in the end, they get an on-chain address that they can pay to. But it's definitely the most hidden option. That is, from our perspective, not the worst. But I think in the end, they can still get there. I mean, it's not an option that we want to present prominently. That's why it's a little bit buried also behind the captcha.
So there's two sides to this, right? There's the printed QR code that we'll distribute to merchants, and that in itself is hard to get right, in my opinion, because of the different options available, and it's not obvious to the majority of users what is and isn't a QR code for a wallet, or what is and isn't supported by their particular wallet. Even at the conference that we hosted, Adopting Bitcoin, we had Bitcoiners come up to who were trying to scan. We had a link to donate to this charity called News Story, and they were trying to scan the QR code in their wallet to pay it, but it was actually a link to this website flow that you're seeing here that we had at the time. We didn't have LNURL. So, I mean, this even confuses Bitcoiners, right? But imagine if you're just the average consumer, average person on the street in El Salvador, you're not gonna know what any of these terms mean, and so there's that, and then there's the actual flow of our web app that we could make better, but I think they're separate problems.
If I understand correctly, this is a problem that will probably exist for years, right? Because right now LNURL is a thing. It seems like Bolt 12 is somewhere on the horizon, and it will take time to finalize and implement. And then there will be Bolt 12 offers and addresses and Lightning addresses. So there's a whole lot of different formats. So it seems like, I mean, that's my impression. Maybe somebody else knows this in more detail, but my impression is that these compatibilities and incompatibilities and many different formats is something we'll have to live with for a while and find good solutions for. And maybe part of this is also talking to wallet teams and saying like, hey, even if you don't support LNURL, at least maybe detect it and say that you don't, and put up a message that you don't support it, and let users know that this is not an error, but it's just an unsupported format, and maybe they should find another way to pay. It's a tricky one.
One idea that pops to mind for me is maybe expanding what you're already doing with the logo that sits inside the middle of the QR code. One kind of thing I remember from El Salvador, at least what Chivo does, is that if you're doing an intra-ledger transfer, then you get a special proprietary QR code that I think is the Chivo barcode, the Chivo logo in the middle, and then if you did an on-chain address or a Bolt 11 invoice, it would change the logo, to like a Bitcoin symbol or a Lightning symbol or something like that. So I'm almost wondering if we could just append some more graphics to explain what these QR codes are, because like to a human, it just looks like a scrambled, mess of a QR code. They have no way of knowing if it's LNURL or a website link or whatever. So I'm almost wondering, like, what if, you have your big QR code in the middle that's got the Bitcoin Beach symbol, and then, I'm not sure about in El Zonte, but in some places, it's common to see like a little sign by the register that says, these are the credit cards we accept, maybe Visa, MasterCard, maybe American Express. So, what if one of these QR codes is just kind of appended with logos of common Bitcoin wallets so that people see the logo of the wallet that they're using, they see it next to that QR code, they know that they're supposed to scan that. That's not an elegant solution. It's not a best solution, but I know the problem you're dealing with is that people are already using this as payment today, and so you need a solution that doesn't have to wait for the entire industry to coalesce around a single standard. So maybe just appending some logos and visuals to some of these QR codes to help people quickly understand what they are could be some low-hanging fruit you could capture in the short term.
That sounds quite interesting to me, because if you think about it, currently when you're going through a web checkout in the fiat world, it's quite common to see card issuer logos next to payment options, and that kind of carries over if we were to do something similar with the wallet logos.
Yeah, I think that context could be pretty helpful. I wonder if another option too is if that fallback QR code shouldn't be visible to the user, because it almost should only be used by the merchant, and then the merchant can create an invoice on behalf of the user. But giving the person access to create their own invoice kind of makes them both the point of sale and the payer of the point of sale.
Can you repeat what you said, Sam? I didn't get it.
Oh, I was just saying, by giving that fallback URL, it almost seems like the merchant should be doing that instead of the user, and then the merchant can create an invoice for them. But it's kind of asking a lot of the user to create their own invoice and then pay the invoice, when really it seems like their responsibility should just be paying an invoice.
Yeah, but I mean, in that case, it means the merchant needs to have a phone handy, which I guess one of the purposes of this QR code is to allow a solution when the merchant do not need to use this phone.
I wasn't aware of that design consideration, but that makes sense.
At least it's something that in Azonte people like, the fact that they can receive funds without having money without having their phone around. Because for instance, you are in a Chenda or in a restaurant, the issue is that only maybe the owner of the restaurant will have the phone. And maybe there is 5 people working in this restaurant. And if the owner is not here, then basically you cannot receive Lightning, or you cannot receive money on Bitcoin unless there is a solution like this that is, it's a bit trusted, because you trust that the person sending the money is really sending it. And you could have a fake screenshot or something like that. But overall, people using the QR code are sending $10, so it's not like you're trying to scam necessarily those people. Or I'm not aware of any scam attempts like trying to make a fake successful QR code when the owner is not here. But I guess the assumption that someone is here with a phone is not always the case, right? So,
apparently, I was reading that security engineers hate QR codes because they're not human readable. Obviously, like during COVID, the use of QR codes has exploded worldwide, not just for use in Bitcoin. But you could imagine a scenario where the QR code in a shop was replaced in some way. The person that owned the shop would never know, and all the payments could end up going somewhere else. To be honest, I'm just mentioning it because it's something that I read about and I thought about. I can't say that we have like this an easy replacement for QR codes right now, so I don't think we have much choice. But it's just an interesting point that I read.
Yeah, and like that is an interesting point, because that could happen even outside the Bitcoin world too. Because I know that people are I see people all the time posting Cash App and Venmo QR codes, on the side of their booth or food stall or whatever here in the USA, and it's like, there's nothing to stop someone from just printing a printing a QR code that looks pretty much the same and replacing it when nobody's looking, or replacing it, overnight or something like that.
I have a question. I'm looking at the photos here in that attached Twitter thread. So I'm looking at this photo here. There's a table. There's a young girl sitting on a chair, and there's a table with jewelry. Looks like, and I see this sign. So as let's say a Bitcoin tourist, I go up to her and say, "Hey, I would like to purchase this bracelet," and she tells me this is XYZ, 5,000 sats, or I don't know, just making up a number, and she tells me, "Oh, please use this sign to pay me," or what do they say? Like how does this work usually? This interaction? Do you maybe know?
Maybe I can chime in. Usually, what the merchants would do, if there's a language barrier between the tourist and the merchant, they would just point at the QR code and ask the customer to pay through the QR code.
Okay, so there's no, they sometimes cannot even help them to say like, you need to just scan this with your Bitcoin wallet and just type in the number. And sometimes none of this interaction happens. And the amount is communicated verbally.
Correct. The amount is communicated verbally, but then the action is just pointing at the code.
Okay. So there's definitely an instructional element to this sign. So maybe it could be like step 1, 2, 3 with, if I see the sign, then I'll say, okay, I'm starting at 1, then I'm, 2 is maybe entering the amount, or, okay. Just helps understand what this interaction might be like. And then after they're done, do they usually have to show the paid invoice, I assume?
Yeah, they usually just look at the confirmation, the green check mark, and then they're good to go.
And they look at the check mark on the customer's phone.
Correct.
Okay, so that could also be part of the sign. Like here, show your confirmation. Okay, that's all. This is a really interesting, really good design challenge. I like this. It's a tough one, but it's good.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that it's unfortunate how complex it is with all the different payment types. I was reading over the design guide, trying to wrap my brain around the different methods. And I counted there was 10 different payment methods. And as a user, you really don't want to think. You just want to walk up, scan a QR code, and pay. And I was also curious about the comma interactions as well. I mean, whether or not the customer has to type in the amount, or is that something that is automatically provided to them in the invoice? If it was me, I would definitely try to just write down what the comma interactions are, so people that are trying to solve this can really have an understanding of, okay, I'm a person trying to buy this. This is what just simplifying it to an extent, because obviously people that are just trying to buy a taco or necklace, they don't care about like the different payment types. They just want it to be easy. And all that complexity isn't necessary to really understand like the task at hand per se. But yeah, I just want to make note. I mean, there's just a lot of complexity to it. And I mean, I'm not an expert on every payment type. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with Bitcoin and using some of the popular wallets, but even some of this stuff for me, I'm having to reread it and try to understand it. So I can only imagine, you add on the language barrier and all the other things. It's definitely, like Christoph said, it's a good problem.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we could work on at some point, is coming up with the common flows that we've seen on the ground, and putting them in a document somewhere that we could share with the design community.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How many different products do these merchants usually sell? Is it oftentimes just one with the same price, or are there many ones with different prices?
There are many. It depends on the merchant, but you have instances where, well, most of the time it's not the same product with different prices, and then you have the ambulant merchants that walk around selling one specific product, like a minuta or coconut. Those have one type of product, but there is quite a few of them that sell pupusas, but also clothes in the same store. So.
Okay.
I was as I was looking over this a day or so ago, I was kind of thinking about like what approach do places like McDonald's and Starbucks take? I mean, do they print out something on the receipt, or how do they handle these type of things? Just out of curiosity.
The receipt?
Yeah, so I'd seen that there, Starbucks and McDonald's are accepting Bitcoin in El Salvador, and if I walk up and I buy something, I'll have a different total each time. And if I wanted to pay with Bitcoin, what's the process there? I mean, do they print out? I'm just curious how that interaction goes.
Yeah, I think for the type of merchants that we're talking about here, most of the time they just write it down. The ambulant merchants, though, what they call the ambulant merchants, meaning the ones that walk around selling one specific item, they don't write down anything. They just take the payment and keep walking. But if they have a store, they need to document their transactions, and they usually do that by writing.
Yeah, but Noor, this is a specific question.
Yeah,
Perhaps you can share some insight.
I think I can chime in. So McDonald's typically they will show you a Lightning invoice with an amount in it. So this works with most Lightning compatible wallets. If you have an on-chain wallet, that is not Lightning enabled, you cannot pay to this. But this is how most of them will work. Like the merchant will have a phone or an iPad to show your QR code.
Thanks.
So I have a quick question. In the original flow, we have the pay code that we're calling, and if that doesn't work, there's a fallback URL. The URL then has to be scanned with the camera that takes you to a separate URL, which shows you a Bolt 11 invoice. Could the Bolt 11 invoice not just be a fallback right on the same screen right there, where you're trying to show the URL for the QR code?
It's a one-time use. Once the invoice is paid in Bolt 11, it can't be used again. So you can't really print it off on a piece of paper. I think the Bolt 12 invoice is the one that when we get that Bolt 12 that it's reusable. But for now, the only reusable thing that we have is LN URL or Lightning address.
Okay.
And one interesting point about that QR code, Prem, is that the fallback one, if that can actually be scanned in the Bitcoin Beach wallet itself to pay to a username. Because we have control over that app, we can do that. We can extract the username from the URL and pay to that username. Other wallets obviously can't do that. So it's even more confusing because some people can scan that app with a wallet and some people can't.
Yeah, but the Bitcoin Beach wallet to Bitcoin Beach wallet will never end up in that second scenario because the first one will be met, right? So
for paycode, yes, you're right. Because we support payments to paycode in the Bitcoin Beach wallet. You're right. Yep.
Totally different question. When I look at all the photos, it looks like all of those signs were printed by the same printing place and laminated. Is that the case, that there's like one manufacturer or printer of these, or how are they created?
I think Salim on the ground have printed most of them, but I know he's been doing those in batches. So you might have some different designs sometime. Like I think the one we see on Twitter are for like it was a surf competition where they print a batch of QR code with the sponsor on top of it for the occasion, but then the merchant keep it. But maybe if you go to some other merchant, 3 months later, they will have the same QR code, but maybe the framing around the QR code might be different because it's also used as I guess as a marketing material, not necessarily only as a page for payments, right? Which is why when you look at the Figma, the design might be different, but sometimes the team on the ground, they just copy the QR code, and put stuff around because it's for a special occasion, and they're doing this frequently.
So what are your next steps with this?
So the next steps, currently the Bitcoin Beach wallet latest release does have support for Lightning address and these pay codes. So for the sake of compatibility with the broader, more Lightning wallets, the idea was to actually print these pay codes with the design and the instructions as you have seen in Figma and the fallback. Do a little bit work on the web URL, the things that we talked about, like the on-chain address, and actually roll it out on the ground. So basically print these pay codes for each merchant and hand them over to them so they can put them on their point of sales.
But I think we saw, some of the feedback that you got, for instance, to think about, okay, I come from a mobile wallet and I am currently we mix the use case where you open the link on your desktop versus you open the link inside with your mobile wallet. We could have different user experience. I think showing the QR code is indeed not maybe the best way to go if you're in front of the merchant. We should just be able to copy the invoice or maybe set an amount. There is certainly a lot of things to improve in this flow, I think.
In the chat, Fernando posted an image with instructions. Have you considered a direction like this? I mean, it's very wordy, but it does have a QR code. It has a list of wallets below, and then there are very wordy instructions.
Hello, everyone. Here in Brazil, we are using a solution with BTCP server. It's like your solution that when you talking about the generation of QR codes. And at the beginning, the users started to go to the merchants to make payments, and they didn't figure out that they need to scan the QR code with the mobile camera. So we started to print these pages and instruct the employees of the places to, understand that. And after that, the next version, we are going to include the LN address because the majority of the wallets, I think they are adopting the standard. So here we have some Brazilian wallets that they are already using LN address. So for our users, I think will be the best to have these capabilities because, it's easier to the user say, oh, look, just send to my email address or email address but the process of to instruct the user to make the right payment, right way to pay, it's a kind of training situation that you need to, go there several times and teach everyone. And also we have a little video showing how the employee can make it. I know that's a little bit complicated, but it's how our users here are dealing with the QR code situation. Any questions?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, Fernando, you are basically sending everyone to open their camera instead of their Bitcoin wallet with that QR. Is that right? And then they open a
Yes.
web page. So it's the same flow for every user.
There are some users because we have two situations. When the owner of the place, the owner of the wallet is there, right? So it's easier. He open his wallet and he can use any wallet that he wants, and then he will create manually the invoice. But when employees using the system, sometimes they don't have access to their wallet. So we receive the payment and we send the payment here to the wallet of the user, of the owner. So the BTC Pay server generate that page that is associated with the QR code, and then the user generate the amount that they need to create the invoice. And sometimes they have some issues because they don't remember about the possibility to make on-chain payments. But after 5 or 6 tries, they start to figure out, oh, we have these two ways to receive. It's like debit and credit. And it's easier to them to understand the context of, because after like 10 or 12 10 or until 20 transactions, are the learning curve of the Brazilians. After 20 transactions, they are ready to go. They are ready to understand, oh, okay, I generate this QR code, and then in our next implementation, we will create some shortcuts to the page in their mobile phones. So it's easier to then just tap the button and then go. Now we are sending the links to every user that needs to create some invoices through WhatsApp. So here's your link, and how we are running a closed beta here. So we are creating subdomains to each user, like bakery.bitcoinbr.org. So every user has these some subdomains that is easier to the user understand. So he don't need to remember like something difficult, like it's very easy to the user without anything, just receive payments and trust in the third party that we are this third party now. We're handling these payments and make the user trust in the system that we maintain to handle these payments. So last week, a user here, a very important user, she's a street vendor who sell some drinks, and she started to use to receive some payments, and she don't wanted to touch in money. She wanted to help our local economy to growth. So she started to receive these payments, and then she started to spend some BTC in the local places that who accept BTC already. So to that user that didn't know anything, we started to, tell her small steps that maybe can help you guys too in that learning situation. That, when she understood that she needs to go to a link, every place that she goes, she already know that she can open a link and then make a payment to this place. So after that, everything changed, and then she started to expand just going to the link. So I send to all places that she can pay, I send to her all links. So she goes to the bakery, she opened the link of the bakery. She goes to any place that she wanted to expand, she using the link already in her mobile and to make that payment. So it can help too.
Yeah, I like the kind of training that would provide to the users, and if it was the same everywhere they went, and no matter what wallet they were using, they used the same flow. It is trading off a bit of seamlessness for Bitcoin Beach wallet users, and other wallets that support the Lightning address pay code and stuff like that. It's definitely interesting to think about that trade-off. Yeah. There was a couple of questions in the chat. Juan asked, has anyone had experience with offline Lightning point of sale? Has anyone on the call used that or know about that?
Nope. I played around with it a little bit in the hack space at Adopting Bitcoin.
Okay.
The offline point of sale, it was, yeah, it's, it's promising, interesting idea. I mean, basically the idea is that the vendor, the merchant, does not need to have an internet connection. The sender, customer, does need to have an internet connection. So it just kind of depends on what your use case is. I don't think you can deploy offline POS to an area where there's literally no internet connection. But it seems to me like it would probably be the most useful thing for like a vending machine or something like that. I don't really think it solves the problem too much, because like I said, you still need one party to have internet in order for it to work.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. And Jay, I've noticed some of your comments in the chat, and just so you know, I think the way that it works is that it might be like an employee that's in manning the stall or the shop, and the owner who owns the wallet doesn't want to give all the employees access to the wallet because that could expose their funds. So they allow the payments to be made, and then the employee or whoever's in the shop can see on the payer's screen that the payment's been made to the correct address or username if they're using the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and release the products. So if that kind of answers your question there, hopefully.
So I have got a follow-up question to that one.
Sure.
I think my impression of it when I was scanning the barcodes in Azante was that you had a situation where like there was one person running a food stall and they were too busy to be pulling out their phone and making invoices for people, so it helped to free up their time. Or other situations where it was difficult to educate somebody about the technology, that just it was foreign concept to them, they're having a hard time learning it, so that not having to interact with the wallet was easier for them. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that it's more of an issue of just being able to delegate access to employees. So I'm just trying to figure out is it all of those problems, or is the predominant problem really just about delegating access to employees, or not being able to delegate access to employees?
Noor, you might be the best to answer that one if you're still around.
It's a tough question to answer because the delegating access to employees, I mean, oftentimes it's and it might be anecdotal. I need to look more into that. Because oftentimes these merchants are family owned, so the phone is like there's the son working or the brother or something along those lines. So it's not so much about delegating the phone per se, but having access to one phone and not knowing where it is at one time, and usually the owner of the store has access to it. So it's more about the and also don't forget the point that I mentioned earlier, which is the language barrier. Being able to, just seamlessly pointing at something that allows the customer to pay automatically and not having to have, explanations and deep dives into what Bitcoin is. Not sure if I answered the question properly, but I can look more into that point specifically to be able to give you an accurate answer.
I think that makes sense. I mean, in terms of the language barrier, it seems like if the merchant was generating an invoice on their phone, like, well, let me put it this one, back up a little bit. We've been talking about an idea in the design community lately about trying to basically cram Lightning invoices into BIP21 payment links. And, essentially what that would mean is you could put an on-chain address and a Lightning invoice in the same QR code, and the wallet just makes its decision about which one it wants to use. So I think that whole payment interaction could be simplified using that method where there's just one QR code. I think if the merchant was generating the QR code on their phone, that could be a payment interaction that could withstand the language barrier, because sometimes when you're trying, even if you know a little bit of the other person's language, communicating numbers is always hard in other languages. And so I think if the merchant wants to charge the tourist $5, they type in 5 and show them the phone, and that seems like that could be a very simple interaction that doesn't require any language. But I see your point about it's not an issue of that not trusting employees or being able to delegate access. It's just the fact that the family only has one phone is what it sounds like. And I guess I'm rambling here. I don't know if I know the exact solution, but I mean, it seems like it would be, it could simplify things a lot if the, pupusa stand just had, if it just had a tablet or something like that, a dedicated point of sale tablet that stayed at the stand, that whoever's running the stand could use. But it sounds like that's not the case, because another member of the family might take the device with them when they leave the stand. So, and that may just be an issue of, device availability or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's another scenario in which the merchant doesn't have access to an easy plug to charge their device if they're a solo merchant and they're walking around. So that's a different scenario.
If they're out there all day and they're far away from a power extension cord, I get it.
But just to sum this up, I would view the delegation issue as a secondary, or probably more likely a tertiary issue. It's certainly not the primary issue we're trying to solve for.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. We're at the top of the hour anyway. Fernando, I know you've got your hand up. Is it something quick you've got to say?
Yes. Here, some merchants would like to delegate access, but only read-only access. So with our solution, we got this code, this wallet, that the user can generate invoices, but he can't send any funds. So it's possible.
That's a good suggestion, Fernando, and that is something that's on our feature roadmap that we're working on, so it will be available shortly. That, as I said, that's the top of the hour. I'd just like to thank everybody for joining. It's good to see so many people on the call. As I said at the start of the call, this is going to be a fortnightly call. I think with the group of people we have, we'll have some interesting conversations and come up with some good solutions. The conversation can continue about this. I'll ping another message into the Slack channel for the Bitcoin design community. I'd encourage everyone to join if you're not already in. And feel free to leave comments on the Figma if I believe you have access to do that. But yeah, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you are. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.